Alright, we played Witch of the Holy Night trial version. I don't even know if this game's gonna work. Because it's a visual novel. So I don't even, the text usually doesn't show up on screen. So I guess we'll see. This is a story of two witches residing in a mansion upon a hill. Witch on the Holy Night Trial 125 or 1-5 or something. Much like the weather outside, the foyer was overcast with shades of gray. Perhaps by deliberate design, the architect had chosen not to include any lights in the entrance area. The ceiling was 2 floors high. The only light in the room came from the skylight. It was particularly gloomy on rainy days. On moonless nights, it was like the world itself ceased to be. Ayoko decided the drawing room to the east would be a good place to rest, but knowing that she would not be able to relax until she changed clothes, she started up the stairs. The stairs curled up the wall to the 2nd floor hall. There was a 3rd floor attic as well, accessible from the far end of the hall. She had never set foot in there in the 2 years she had lived there, though. The Kuonji mansion was more or less divided into 2 wings, east and west. Ayoko had been given the entire east wing, but 2 rooms were more than enough as far as she was concerned. She had no desire to open the door that would trap you in a storybook world, or lead to an attic that had only been used for storage these last 5 years. Ayoko's room was at the end of the east wing's long corridor. She had elected for a smaller room for no other reason than that she thought it would be easier to clean. It was furnished with a large bed, her beloved mahogany desk, a wardrobe and chest for her clothes, and 2 9-shelf bookcases. That is all she brought with her from home. Her entire life of 16 years reduced to this. She borrowed the next room down for her own purposes. 外、ありものかもしれない。ありものかどうかもないしろ。Oh yeah, I should check on the watchtower I got from Alice. She needed to see if the project she had been working on all night had borne fruit. The study next door served as proof of the life she had been living for the last year, and how different that life was from the one she had lived before. It was not a room for the person she had been. It was a room for the person she would eventually become, a place of solitude that only she could enter, or so she thought. Wow. Not only did it break, it vanished without a trace. Looks like I've still got a long way to go. Go ahead, laugh it up, Robin. The nosy neighbor that had intruded upon her sanctuary flew away. While not exceptionally talented, Ayoko did not lack for effort and was not afraid to fail. One could have almost mistaken her approach for optimism. She changed out of her uniform and returned to the 1st floor. Down the stairs, she opened the door to the east wing into the corridor as dark as a cellar. The absence of windows meant it was pitch black without the lights on, so she flicked the switch and entered the nearby doorway. Life without electricity. I don't even want to imagine it. It had been her idea to update the drawing room. The walls were decorated with extravagant patterns, and around the room were large, majestic sofas and a luxurious Persian rug. Amidst it all was a 30-inch television that seemed completely out of place. It stood looking over the other furniture like the emperor with no clothes. The mansion's owner would have rather done without it, but to a commoner like Ayoko, it was an essential commodity. They had fought over its presence at first, but eventually came to an agreement and now mutually enjoyed this modern comfort. Guess I'm gonna talk. I came from a pretty traditional household myself. Now in a somewhat pleasant mood, she decided to brew some tea. She boiled some water in the kitchen, prepared a teapot, and made herself some black tea. With a flop, she sank into the sofa. She took a sip of her tea, then another. I really like the piano music in the back. Lulled by the ticking of the clock, she took a third sip as she pondered how to spend her afternoon. The sofa almost seemed to be inviting her, and she sunk even further into its comforting embrace. Ayoko blearily opened her eyes as she lifted her body up from the cushions. This was no dream or delusion. At some point, a girl had sat down across from her. Not the least bit surprised, she reached for her teacup. But the tea within had gone completely cold. Did I doze off? She asked the question to the girl on the other side of the table. Yes. The girl answered without lifting her gaze. When silent, she could have been mistaken for a beautiful doll. The girl sitting on the opposite sofa was reading an old book. She had delicate limbs and pale white skin. Not a hint of humanity emanated from her melancholic aura. She had darker hair than Ayoko, and her icy eyes were focused on the pages in front of her. Her clothes resembled that of a nun, but were actually her school uniform. In Ayoko's humble opinion, the gloominess suited her. She evoked something like out of a painting. There was something unreal about her, as if she were frozen in time. The white of her neck was so lovely that even Ayoko found herself enchanted by it. The girl was one of the haunted house's 2 residents. Her name was Alice Kuonji, and she was the same age as Ayoko. How long was I asleep? At least an hour. You'll catch a cold if you keep sleeping here. Alice answered indifferently. Not that it bothered Ayoko, who was now used to it. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw that it was already 7. She had been asleep for 2 hours. The day had been a rough one for her, and she had slept little the night before, so it was no surprise that she had dozed off for as long as she had. You could have woken me up. Now my tea's cold. It was already cold by the time I got here.
でしょうね。行ってみただけよ。
I'm sure it was. I'm just saying. Ayoko drank down the rest of the cold tea in one gulp. In the poorly heated Kuonji mansion, that was more than enough to clear her head and wake up.
こうなると、フォートナム&メイソンも何もないわね。
Nothing quite beats this tea, not even the expensive kind from Britain.
おかえり、アリス。
Anyway,
玉の贅
welcome
沢
home,
もあんた抜
Alice.
きじゃ閉まらないってこ
The
とかしら。
universe seems determined to keep me from even the occasional luxury without
今
you.
日は薬日か天中殺か。ちょっと早いけど。
What is it
お参
about
りって
today?
十分ありかもね。
It's just my luck or what? At this rate, I'm due a temple visit, just to be safe. Ayoko shrugged. Ayoko shrugged her shoulders as if resigning herself to her fate.
それで何があったの？
Something happened? After 2 years together, they knew each other quite well. Ayoko had one way of asking questions, and Alice had another. Alice asked without raising her head, and Ayoko gave her the details.
まず謝らなくちゃいけない。
I should start by apologizing.
昨日徹夜で完成させた例のあれ、意味がなくなっちゃったのよ。ちょっと目を離した隙に沸騰しすぎて壊れちゃったみたい。
The project I was working on all night was a total failure, and even though I only took my eyes off it for a second, it must have boiled over and been destroyed.
そうならないよう、循環のコードを2、3本外したり、縫合したりしたんだけど。
Though I'll add that I shuffled the circulation codes as a precaution. Ayoko tried to laugh it off as if it was someone else's problem.
どういうこと？
And
今朝休養が入って、
something
学校に
came
呼
up
び出
this
し受け
morning,
たの。
and I was called into
そこで
school.
転入生の世話を押し付けられて、一日が無残にも消費されちゃって、帰ってきたら跡形もなく消えてました。
They made me show this transfer student around, and it took up my whole day. By the time I got back, it had vanished without a
怒る？
trace.
アリス。
You're not mad, are you?
別に青子の器物破損にいちいち怒っていたら一生分の口論をすることになるでしょう。
Hardly. If I got mad every time you broke something, there would be no end to the
代
fighting.
用品があるからまた一から始めればいいわ。
I have more materials, so you can just start over.
それより怒ってるのはあなたの方じゃないの？
The anime character just opened her eyes and fucking creeped me out. However, aren't you really the one who's angry? Alice was very much on point today. It was true that, despite outward appearances, Ayoko was seething with frustration. That aside,
ねえ、この転入生っていうのがひどくずれててね。
true enough, the transfer student I mentioned earlier was a real piece of work.
すごい山奥で暮らしてたらしくて、こっちの常識が通じないんだから。三問以下って言葉があるけど、あれって本当のことなのね、アリス。
He's been living deep in the mountains and has literally zero common sense. I know people say that the mountains are like an entirely different world, but I had no idea how true it was, Alice. Alice raised her head in response to hearing her name, but Ayoko kept going on before she could get a word in edgewise. Ayoko, after all, expected no sympathy in the first place.
初対面から尺に触るやつだったけど、教室を案内した時なんか失神しそうになったわ。
We didn't get along well from the start, but things really took a turn for the worse when I took him to a classroom.
そいつ、教室で教師と1対1で授業を受けるもんだと思ってたらしいの。ええ、それはそれでまだ流せる。許容範囲よ、あの程度の冗談は。
He apparently thought it was a place where you'd get one-on-one tutoring, and that's not all. I mean, you're never gonna believe this.
で、私が簡潔かつ丁寧に教室の何たるかを教えた後で、そいつなんて言ったと思う？
What do you think he asked when I politely explained what a classroom is to him?
それで青崎、他の教室は何に使うんだ？
But then what are other classrooms for?
ですって。
Unbelievable, right?
教室に他も何もないでしょ。
I mean, a classroom is a classroom.
なんていうか、そいつは少しでも説明を怠るとそのままで納得しちゃうのよ。
And no matter how vague or unhelpful anything I said was, he just kept nodding.
何も疑問に思わないというか、想像力が欠如してるっていうか、想像することに慣れてないっていうか。
It's like he was just taking everything at face value. I don't know if he just lacks an imagination or never uses it.
まあ、 一度言ったことはちゃんと分かってるっぽいからバカってわけじゃないんだけど。
Anyway, he at least seemed to grasp most of what I told him the first time around, so I suppose he's not a complete idiot.
あなたが人を批評するのは珍しいわね。
It's
そう
rare
い
to
う
see.
ダメな人、気にするたちだったの。
It's rare to see you so judgmental. Is it really worth getting worked up over someone like that?
みじんたりとも気にしないわよ。けど、明日からどんな間違いをしでかすのか、ちょっと心配なだけ。
I couldn't care less about him. I'm just worried he'll screw up somehow. What she was really worried about was having to clean up that mess if and when it happened. That had to be it. If not, it would mean she had no real idea why she could not get him out of his head.
とにかく変なやつなの。案外アリスと気が合うかも。
Well, he was a weirdo, alright. You two would probably hit it off great.
三問一回はいい言葉ね。
Another world in the mountains doesn't sound so bad. But from her eyes, it was clear that the question of whether they would get along was irrelevant, given that they would never meet in the first place. Ayoko gave a non-committal response.
ところでアリス、さっきから何読んでるの？
Anyway, what have you been reading?
霊的進化論の二次創作。
A
ス
book
ピリチュアルダイアリのまがいもの。
about spiritual evolution based on the spiritual diary.
ああ、スウェーデンボリー。そんなの今更読んでも仕方ないんじゃない？
Ah, Swedenborg, huh? Is that really worth reading again?
新書なら退屈だけど、これは偽書だから。
I wouldn't bother if they were the original, but this is a knockoff.
彼の欠点と長所を劇的に褒め上げている。よくできた冒険小説のようよ。
It exaggerates the
立
pros
ち
and
はだかる秘
cons
密組織の名前がカントとか気が利いているわ。
of Swedenborg's style and reads like a well-written adventure. Having the secret organization Kant standing in his way was a nice addition.
筆跡はあなたのおじいさんのものだけど。
The handwriting of the notes in the margin belongs to your grandfather, by the way.
へえ、あの人そういう趣味まであったんだ。割とユーモアがあったのね。欲しい人を亡くしたわ。
I had no idea he was into that sort of thing. He had a great sense of humor. I really miss him. Ayoko seemed nostalgic over her now deceased grandfather.
あなたのおじいさん、夏に頼りをくれたけど。
He just contacted you this last summer, didn't he?
よしてよ、死んだものと考えたいのに。
Do we really have to go there? Why can't Dad stay dead? Ayoko sighed and laid back on the sofa. The soft cushions caved in under her weight.
話は戻るけど。
As I was saying, Alice shot a glance at Ayoko. Her body, buried in the sofa, remained as still as a corpse. It was clear Ayoko had tuned out of the conversation. She looks creepy when she stares at the fucking camera like that. Alice silently chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important the events of the day seemed to become. If she just ignored Alice, the conversation would end there. They would eventually get up and leave today's mistake unresolved for another day. However, that's not the kind of person Ayoko Ayazaki was.
いいわよ。何？
Yeah, what is it? She asked, still lying down.
今日できなかったのは
It's
少し
upsetting.
痛いわね。
It's upsetting that you felt today.
だから反省してるって。学校優先は一人前になってからでしょ。
Like I said, I'm thinking about it. I need to focus on becoming a full-fledged mage before thinking about school. I know that. Oh,
ならいいけど。
I hope you do. The coldness in her voice made Ayoko gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore for school was different than the way she lived at home. While it could be called hiding in plain sight, Alice thought it was silly. And what the silence told her was,
覚悟を決めろって言いたいのよね。
make up your mind already, I know. Today's failure was not a colossal one. She just happened to upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, chasing one at the expense of the other. And yet, that careless mistake was a clear sign of Ayoko's lack of commitment.
アリスは関係ない。これは私が私で決めなくちゃいけないこと。
This doesn't concern Alice. It's my decision to make. She had only known for sure for the last year and a half, but she'd had a hunch for as long as she could remember. Make the choice, and the day will come. It was little wonder that her morals and conscience had been stripped away. Ayoko pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and wordless gaze.
OK アリス、来週中に決着をつけよう。
Okay, Alice, we can do it next week.
それでいいんでしょ？
That work for you?
ええ、青子がいいなら。
As long as it works for you. Ayoko could not help but shake her head, feeling like she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish thoughts of that country boy from her mind.
じゃあ下準備はよろしくね。私まだできないし。
I'll let you set it up then. That's still beyond my abilities.
場所は例の公園でいい？
Should we do it at that park?
妥当な線ね。あ、でももう一件の方は？
Sure, the line there is suitable enough, but what about that other
そ
thing?
っちの方が急務じゃない？
Isn't that a more urgent concern?
時と場合、森に変化があれば教えるわ。
It depends on the conditions. I'll let you know if there are any changes to the woods. After that brief exchange, Alice returned her attention to the book on her lap. Shop talk was over. Now they could return to their normal relationship as roommates. Ayoko grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Since Alice was busy reading, Ayoko decided to tune in to a variety show that had already started. Alice started to speak, but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raised to her mouth. She would always cut herself off the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Sometimes her self-restraint would hit too late, and she would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Ayoko that the sound her cute little roommate made just now was different than the what she blurted in times past. What is it? Ayoko turned down the volume of the TV. Her intense eyes lit up like those of a mischievous cat. It's nothing really, but...
ないんだけど？
But what? Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she should bring it up or not. It was times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If he could see her in this moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited her perfectly.
今日帰ってくる時おかしなものを見て、
It's
誰
just
かに
that
話そうと思っていたんだけど。
I saw something strange on my way home and wanted to tell someone about it. Ayoko nodded, beckoning her to continue.
つまらない。
It's
本
silly,
当に意味
really.
のないことよ。けど、どう考えてもそんなことをする理由がわからない。
But I just can't make sense of it, no matter how much I think about it.
人間ぐらいの大きな猫がひょこひょこ出前をする理由って。
Ayoko, do you have any idea why a man-sized cat would be riding around town delivering meals to people? For a second, Ayoko thought Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. One would think that about anyone, really. But she seemed completely serious. Even if Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Ayoko, this story already sounded more fanciful than Alice's usual attempt at jokes. Ayoko concluded that her roommate was talking about something she had actually seen.
その話には2つぐらい信じがたい部分があるけど、1つずつ論破していい？
There are a few things off about that. Maybe we should break it down.
私もからくりぐらいは思いつくから。
Let's not. Even I can think of a few mundane explanations.
ただ、理由がわからないから聞いてるの。わざわざ精巧な猫のぬいぐるみを着て、出前のてんやものを届けに行くことって、
I'm just
そん
asking
なに簡単かしらね。
because I can't figure out why somebody would do that. Maybe it's as simple as someone just dressing up in a finely crafted catsuit to deliver food for a restaurant.
難易度以前に、それをやる人間の常識性を疑うけどね、私は。
I'm more worried about the person doing it than the reasons personally. Alice nodded tentatively at her words.
まあ世の中いろいろあるから私たちみたいなのもいれば下界から遮断された山奥で暮らしていたやつまで10人といるよ
But whatever does it for them, I guess. In a world with people like us and weirdos that live like mountain hermits, there's no telling what kind of freaks are out there.
私だったら見かけたら声かけて理由を尋ねただろうけど
I personally would have just gone up to them and asked what they were doing. Alice's gaze drifted at that.
暮れゆく住宅街にさまよう出前ね、背景が夕焼けだったらファンタジーだったでしょうに
A delivery cat riding through neighborhoods in the evening? Sounds like something straight out of a fantasy story.
で、今日の夕飯どうする
Hey,
せっかく話が出たし、私らもてんやものにしようか
what should we do for dinner tonight? Speaking of delivery, maybe we should order in. Ayoko loved getting takeout, and her face glowed as she spoke. They had no hard rules for dinner, but if one of them was in the mood to cook, they made it a point to make enough for two. At the very worst, this meant entire weeks without dinner, but the two of them agreed that this was the system that worked best for them. Whether they found cooking to be too much effort or simply liked ordering out. Nights like this one were a common occurrence, much to the chagrin of the restaurants of Misaki Town. Delivering to the mansion meant coming all the way up to the top of this hill, the source of their disgruntlement.
時間は8時前ギリギリセーフね私今月がいいなあそこの月見そば最近ご無沙汰だったし
It's still before 8, so we're good. I'm really in the mood for kongetsu tonight. I haven't had their tsukimi soba in ages. The hungry student council president took out their many menus and excitedly looked for anything that stood out. Alice casually responded without sparing so much as a glance.
悪いけど私夕飯済んでるの
Sorry, but I've already had dinner. With those words, Ayoko froze. All delivery required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Cruel society had decided it couldn't be bothered to deliver to a princess who only ordered a single serving of food. Incidentally, to counteract orders from the Hilltop Mansion, the restaurants had declared, the minimum number of orders will be 3 starting next year. Ayoko and Alice were still in the dark to this fiendish change in direction.
この裏切り者
Traitor!
だから帰ってくるのが遅かったのね
Is that why you were late getting back?
帰宅部学校までバス徒歩込みで片道20分のあんたがなんで5時以降に帰ってくるのか考えるべきだったわ
Between the bus ride and the walk, the trip home takes only 20 minutes. I should have known something was up when you didn't get home before 5 o'clock. Unfortunately for Ayoko, she had been too out of it to even remember that she was the one who'd fallen asleep.
ああひどい女そういう時は残された一人のためにお土産
No. Oh, I was about to say.
ああひどい女そういう時は残された一人のためにお土産買ってくるのが暗黙の了解だったのに
Talk about Ice Queen. I thought it was clear that if either of us got food, we would bring enough home for the other
私
person.
だってこの前の外食の時はアリスの分も買ってきたじゃない
Didn't I bring back something for you when I ate out last time? It was unknown how serious Ayoko was being, but she was visibly angry. She had already woken up hungry that morning, and from the time she was called into school until now, she had consumed nothing but tea. It was a small miracle that her stomach was not growling. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted, wanting to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier.
この前ってあれのこと
By last time, you mean...
あなたが都心に出向いた時夕食にお寿司を食べてきたのお土産はなぜかコンビニエンスストアのビニール袋だったって話
The time you went into the city and ate sushi, but only came back with a plastic bag full of convenience store food? That time? Ayoko had kicked the hornet's nest.
何よ買ってこないよりはマシでしょ
So what? It was better than nothing, wasn't it?
真実は時に隠蔽すべきね
There are times when you'd be better off saying nothing at all. Alice's icy gaze pierced right through her. Ayoko had certainly crossed the line by going on and on about how the sushi circled around the restaurant while Alice ate her convenience store meal. But new things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain her curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up at the time. They were nothing short of miraculous. Even honesty can be a sin, given the right circumstances.
わかった。わかりました。じゃあ今回のは前のと帳消しってことでいいわね。
Fine, fine, I get it. Does this at least me or even now? Alice went back to her book without so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she did not confirm it made Ayoko anxious.
仕方ない。今日は薬日だし、おとなしく台所に立って料理の腕を磨くとしましょう。
Well, today has been a total disaster. I guess I'll just whip up something in the kitchen. She stood up, announcing her intent to no one in particular.
あ、聞き忘れてた。アリス、どこで夕食済ませたの？
Oh, I almost forgot to ask. Where did you end up eating anyway? Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book she was reading and stood up, as if at wit's end. She walked across the drawing room with her book in hand. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned toward Ayoko.
聞きたい。
You really want to know?
まあ、なんとなく。
Sure. Ayoko nodded timidly, cowered by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued in her matter-of-fact way.
その猫が余ったメニューをくれたのよ。
The cat gave me one of his leftover deliveries. And with that brief response, she left the room. Seven to X. Walking around the mansion at night often led to mysterious encounters. Mist might suddenly fill the hallway, or doors might appear and disappear. Just when Sojiro thought he had seen it all with pig-shaped shadows mending the carpet, he heard the sound of a bird's flapping coming from the sunroom. What's going on over there? As much as he had become accustomed to turning a blind eye to such occurrences, the sound of flapping wings in the sunroom was too much to ignore. And not just one bird, or even two, it sounded like dozens. So many birds packed in the sunroom would inevitably lead to shattered windows and broken glass. Sojiro grabbed the broom and dashed toward the sound, prepared for the worst. Perhaps he was moved by his natural impulse to help, or desperate self-defense. His mind flashed to what a teacher had said at school.
皆さんも部屋の整頓は心がけてくださいね。人間の自制心って環境に流されるらしいですから。
Should all make sure to keep your rooms orderly and clean. Work ethic and self-discipline will have a positive impact on your surroundings.
ほら、それまで犯罪の少ない町だったのに、一つボロボロの家ができただけで、近隣住人がみんな自堕落になるというあれ。
Think about it. Even in a nice neighborhood where there isn't much crime, it only takes one ill-kept house to send the whole block into a spiral of depravity.
環境への無関心さがすさんだ精神を作り上げるとか眉唾ですけど、正直なところブームだからって盗んだバイクで走り回ったり、学校の廊下の窓ガラスとか割って回っちゃダメですよ。先生の仕事が増えますから。
Of course, we all know a messy room won't turn you into a criminal, but I'd better not catch any of you breaking windows in the hallway or going for a joyride on stolen motorcycles. Think of all the pain you'd be causing your poor teacher. At the time, school gangs had garnered a certain reputation among the youths. Broken windows lead to broken hearts. Sojiro appreciated the basic message of the lecture as he ruminated over it. The thought of broken windows had given him a sense of urgency, as if the mansion's very moral foundations were at stake. His roommates were harsh enough with him already. Anything further would only lead to rampant rumors at school about their cruelty. He had to protect the honor of the student council president. It was also concern for his own safety that sent him rushing to the sunroom. However, there wasn't a bird to be seen or a chirp to be heard upon his arrival.
あら、
Oh, hey. Only Alice and Ayoko, sipping afternoon tea at the table that overlooked the courtyard, were present. The dozens of birds Sojiro had sensed with his mountain intuition were nowhere to be seen.
今ここに鳥が来なかった。
Did anyone see a flock of birds?
アリス、見た？
Alice?
さあ、
Who
もう見
knows?
えないのならいないということでしょう。
If I can't see them, there must not be any birds.
だっていないよ、
You
鳥。
heard her. No birds. It was a lie so blatant even Sojiro could see through it.
そんなバカな。
That can't be true. He knew for a fact he had heard the flapping of a flock of birds. Unable to accept that there really were no wild animals in the room, Sojiro approached the windows with suspicion. There were no feathers or any other signs of birds having been outside either.
夕食、鳥鍋？
Oh right, dinner. Chicken stew, was it? Of course, Ayoko would say something like that as she watched Sojiro search desperately.
あいにく今日のバイトは魚屋さんだ。イワシでよければ土産にするけど。
Sorry, I'm working at the fish place tonight, but I've got you covered if you want sardines.
イワシ。イワシか？私、あのパイ嫌いなのよね。
Sardines, huh? I don't like sardine pie.
いえ、むしろイワシのパイとか食べたことないのよね。
Not that I've ever had it. Ayoko's stand-up routine was far ahead of its time. Sojiro backed away from the window and begrudgingly left the sunroom. Feeling Alice's all too familiar, inscrutable gaze upon his back.
なんだい、アリ。
What's up, Alice? Just as he opened his mouth to ask her what she wanted.
あいった。
Ow! A blue comet crashed into his head. It needed no explanation. It could only be Robin, the mysterious bird that appeared frequently in the mansion. Chirp, 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 it shrilled accusingly. The truth was, the tiny aggressor that assaulted him just now was the greatest of the mansion's 7 wonders. Sojiro encountered all sorts of people along his route to work. Still new to city life, he found the crowds of people outside the station utterly fascinating. In fact, they were the highlight of his commute. No two people wore exactly the same clothes or walked in the same fashion. With so many people, you would think they would all melt into an indistinguishable huddle, but each person he saw was different and unique. Sojiro was excited as a child as he looked out at the bustling, diverse streets of the city.
いや、
Stop it. Closing his eyes in shame, he sighed. He was upset with himself for behaving like a bumbling tourist from the countryside.
ちょっと、青信号で突っ立ってられるの邪魔なんだけど。何柄にもなく黄昏てるんだか。
Hey, you'll get in people's way spacing out in front of the crosswalk like that. Daydream somewhere else. A stern and familiar voice behind him snapped him out of his navel gazing.
なんだ、マッドベアに行く途中だったんだ。
Let me guess, on your way to the Mad Bear?
ふん。私はコンビニのバイト。こっちは5時からだけど。 しずきは
My shift at the convenience store starts at 5. You?
同じく5時から。くまりはどこか寄るところでも？
Same. 5 o'clock start. Were you on your way somewhere else?
本屋に寄った帰り読みたかった本がなくなってたから仕方なく出歩いてたところよ。
I just stopped by a bookstore. I'm out of stuff to read, so I thought I'd look for something new.
なるほど。時間を持て余しているところも同じだね。
I see. I guess we both have some time to spare. The girl who greeted him was Kojika Kumari, a work friend who was also in the same year as Misaki High. Though it would have been more accurate to say she was looking for a pretext to fight him rather than greet him. To Sojiro, Kumari had been the first person in the city he could look up to. They'd met at his first job, where she insisted he wasn't cut out to work the register after many mistakes and convinced him to quit working at convenience stores altogether. In the end, she introduced him to his current job at the Chinese restaurant, the Mad Bear, a much better fit for Sojiro.
何その無理やりな顔。なんか元気ない。いつも以上にイラッとくる。
You look a little worse for wear, Shizuki. Why the long face? I've never seen you so
し
pouty.
ずきのいいところなんていつもピシッとしてる背筋ぐらいなのに。
Usually standing up straight is the one thing you're good at.
もしかして悩みとかあるの？マッドベアにタチの悪い先輩でもいるとか。
Something on your mind?
それ
Wait,
なら話ぐらいは聞いてあげるから。
are
言って
you
みたら。
are you getting bullied by the older guys at the Mad Bear? You can tell me anything, you know. Though her tone was stern, her eyes were earnest. Having grown up in the city herself, she was irritated by virtually everything Sojiro said and did. Nevertheless, she still treated him like an equal. Introducing him to his current job was just one example of her sincerity.
いや、別に悩みとかそういうんじゃなくて、不思議なことがあったというか、珍しいものを見た。
No, nothing like that. It's just something strange happened. Something really unusual. Sojiro could not find the words to explain the situation, but that did not stop him from trying. There were no problems with the Mad Bear to speak of. He liked it just as much as his other job at Owatatsu, the fishmongers in the shopping district. In fact, his problem had nothing to do with work at all. No, his problem was a certain blue bird that would not stop picking at him recently.
鳥につっつかれる？何それ？小さい悩み。
You're getting picked by a bird? Wow, and here I was thinking the world had ended.
でもまあ、青い鳥っていうのは確かに珍しいよね。
It is pretty unusual for a bird to be blue, I
いや、
guess.
珍しいのは外見の話じゃなくて。
And that's not the only thing unusual about it. He stopped, unsure of how to proceed. Words alone were not enough to convey the bird's plump body or the sound of its chirping.
綺麗な青色といったらマウンテンブルーバードだけど、日本にはいないわよね。
There is a beautifully colored bird called a mountain bluebird, but they're not native to Japan.
青いツバメだったらいるかもしれないけど。
Maybe it's a blue swallow?
いや、ツバメじゃなくて丸っこいんだ。図鑑で調べたんだけど、どうもコマドリっぽい。
No, it's more round than a swallow. I tried to look it up in a bird book, and the closest thing I found is a robin.
青色のコマドリは存在しない。
Yeah, but robins aren't blue.
しずきは縁日の青ひよこって知ってる？知らないわよね。いい、そう面白い話じゃないから忘れて。
You know those blue chicks that have affairs in the city? Of course you don't. Why would you? Just forget
そ
it.
れより、そのコマドリって1羽だけなの？
Anyway, this robin, is it the only one?
ああ、1羽だけだ。つがいは見当たらない。
Yeah, there's only one. It doesn't seem to have a mate.
突然変異だとしたらちょっとかわいそうね。
Well, if it's the only one of its kind, then I feel kind of
生
sorry
まれた
for
時
it.
から最後の1羽だなんて。孤独にも程があるわ。
Imagine being the last one of your kind since the day you're born. Talk about lonely.
どんな鳥かは知らないけど、次に見かけたら優しくしてあげたら、自販機で10円を拾うぐらいの幸運が運んでくれるかもよ。
I have no idea what species it could be. Maybe you should try being nice to it next time. It might bring you something special, like when you find a 10 yen coin in a vending machine. Her words were perfectly kind, but he could hardly sympathize with the creature after all the painful pecking to which it had subjected him. He wouldn't have called the bird lonely either.
いいじゃない。 1羽ぐらい。
If one little bird is all that's bothering you, you're lucky.
そりゃ都会で鳥につつかれるのは珍しいけど、いい方の珍事よそれ。これがゴミ袋を漁るカラスの大群だったら困りものでしょうけど。
The picking part is weird for sure, especially in a city like this, but it could be way worse. Imagine getting attacked by an army of crows that swarm around the dumpsters.
そういえば他にも気になることが。
Right. Actually, there was something else bothering me too. Her example had reminded him of the mystery of the disappearing birds at the mansion. A stranger than strange event.
実は今あそこに見える丘に住んでるんだけど。
See that hill? I actually live on it.
出るんだ。大量のムクドリが頻繁に。そのくせ街に出ると見かけない。
See lots of starlings around there, but for some reason they never come down to
当たり
town.
前でしょう。街じゃ鳥なんて見かけないし、あそこは山だから動物は多いんじゃない？
Well, duh. You never see birds in town, but on a mountain like that, there are bound to be wild animals.
それよりあなた、あの山に引っ越したの？前のアパートは引き払ったって聞いてたけど、学校まで通うの大変じゃない？
Why would you move way out there anyway? I mean, I heard you moved out of your old apartment, but isn't it a pain getting to school? What are you doing out there in the boonies?
ちょっとした成り行きだよ。それに通うのは大変じゃない。大変なのは中の話なんだ。
Things just worked out that way, and the commute isn't hard. If anything is painful, it's what happens inside that place. Huh? It took 30 minutes to reach town on foot. The 40 minutes to the nearest convenience store would be the real kicker for most people, but for Sejiro, it was no inconvenience. The real problem was the dark forces beyond human understanding that lurked within the grounds.
すまない。それはクマリに話すことじゃなかった。
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring all my complaints to you.
それより今の話だ。街には鳥が少ないと言ったけど、どうして？
I'm curious about how you said there aren't many birds in town though. Why is that?
単に環境に適応できなかったのよ。
Simple. They failed to adapt to the environment.
何？鳥の話には随分と食いつくわね。しずき、動物好き？
I didn't know you were so interested in birds. Are you an animal lover or something?
どちらかというと好きな方だけど。
I guess I do like animals more than I dislike them.
そう、私は嫌い。そんな私に鳥の話とかしてほしい。
Really? I can't stand them. I'm surprised you didn't pick up on it sooner. Her statement could hardly be more self-contradictory. Minutes after telling him to be nice to a bird that attacked him, she was now claiming she did not even like animals.
そうだな。嫌いなだけで苦手でないのなら、知ってる範囲で聞かせてほしい。
Well, even if you can't stand animals, I'd still like to hear what you know about birds.
痛いとこつくじゃない。
Can't take a hint, huh?
いいわ。バイトまでの時間つぶしにしてあげる。
Fine, I need to kill some time until work starts
さっきの
anyways.
続き。環境に適応できるかできないかってところからね。
So like I was saying, survival is all about being able to adapt to your environment. Man, what am I... I'm just reading. 2-0. The morning sun alerted Sejiro that a day of work lay ahead. Specifically, the gardens needed tending to, and an unkempt garden made for an unhappy Sejiro. Luckily, today was his day off from all his part-time jobs. It was the perfect opportunity to get his hands dirty. Ooh, that's a lot of work. There was one problem, however. The mansion's grounds were vast. Not only had the courtyard been left to run wild, but the area around the front door had been neglected too. To tend to these problems thoroughly, he would have to work on them week in, week out.
まずは地ならしだな。
Alright, first let's level things out. In an ideal world, this task would only take a day, but for its enormity, for the moment Sejiro decided to set foot into the mansion's wilderness and evict the weeds. Wasting none of the early light, he started tackling the ones around the mansion.
よし、まずは地ならしだな。
Alright, first let's level things out. In an ideal world, this task would only take a day, but for its enormity, for the moment Sejiro decided to set foot into the mansion's wilderness and evict the weeds. Wasting none of the early light, he started tackling the ones around the mansion. By his estimation, he could clear the forecourt, courtyard, and backyard, then take a small rest. That is a lot. What's gotten into him?
さあ、草摘みが趣味ってわけじゃなさそうだけど。
Beats me. I doubt he's out there for fun. It was just before noon in the sunroom. Alice had come down, book in hand, to find Ayoko sitting down with a fashion magazine and elegantly sipping tea. Through the window, she could see the crouched figure of Sachiro shuffling by.
朝からやってるみたいよ。
He's been at it all morning.
起きてカーテンを開けたら、もうあの格好でスパスパやってたから。ついでに焼却炉の掃除も言いつけといたけど。
Hunched over since I saw him first thing in my bedroom window, I told him to clean the incinerator too. Any objections?
いいけど、頑張るのね、彼。
Not really.
外はあんなにも寒いの。
He always works so hard, even in the cold. Alice quietly sat down. Her teacup had been placed on the table for her. She poured herself some tea and proceeded to open her book. The two sat, passing the time in silence. Having happened to have the same idea, a nice relaxing cup of tea in the sunroom. With their evening roles decided, there was no need for idle chatter. Ayoko stared out the window, intermittently turning her gaze to her magazine. Alice was immersed in a book on ruined magecraft, occasionally tilting her head up as if to recall something. As if by an unspoken agreement, in unison, they pressed their teacups to their lips and glanced outside. To the two girls, Sojiro appeared as if he were an animal in a zoo. Neither was interested in lending a hand. Despite his sluggish movement, he was making good progress. As Ayoko's attention turned back to the sunroom, her eyes met Alice's. Alice returned her gaze to her book, though moments later she raised her head again. Clearing her throat, she attempted to focus on reading. It was no surprise that Alice admired Sojiro's diligence. Not even 30 minutes had passed before he had cleared the courtyard of its unsightly weeds. Without stopping once, the mysterious gardener left the courtyard, puffing clouds of white breath. The area he left behind was spotless. Has he done this before? Alice muttered after scanning over his work. A stalwart, Sojiro worked confidently and ceaselessly. She was impressed, like she was watching a scene from a great movie, but before long she grew irked. Why would he waste his energy like that, she thought. Alice looked at the clock. If he starts now, it'll be evening before he's done with the incinerator. Actually, he already took care of it. I watched him do it from upstairs. I didn't want him breaking it, so I gave him some pointers. You know, I yelled at him for so long from my window, my room almost froze over. It was safe to assume Ayoko had come to the sunroom to escape her cold room. Between barking orders from a window and cleaning in the cold, it was clear who had the harder job. Did Suzuki have anything to say? Yeah, a lot, but I couldn't really hear him. In other words, his complaints fell on deaf ears. However, you should be wary, young lady, for this is not a story of just warmth and cheer. From here, we cross into the realm of night, bordering fact and fiction. And so, Let us now speak of the witch and her day. Okay. 1.5 to 3. Good morning. Time check 00. 24 hours since last update. Running back up, transmitting log. Commencing local scan. Atmospheric analysis. Nitrogen nominal. Oxygen nominal. Argon nominal. Carbon dioxide nominal. Theoretical fifth element. Multiple anomalies detected. Local spacetime discrepancy detected. Conclusion: Contact Class 1 threat. Shifting perception range from subjective to objective. Shifting autonomous circuit to reserve power. Shifting diagnostic circuit to main power. Shifting view mode. IR filter inactive. I filter active. Now, it begins. Initiating combat log. O Master, preserve me from harm. Misaki City was a thickly wooded area. Urban development continued unabated, but Mother Nature still drew breath in its outskirts. Wise old trees had been turned to lumber. The leaves had begun to turn to mulch. Even though the birds, who curiously tilted their heads, had moved on, the verdure lived on, a testament to its enduring strength. Until the time came that the devouring light of civilization became powerful enough to encroach upon nature's mysterious domain. These woods were no exception. The outlying border between Misaki City and Misaki Hills had been left untouched. Though driven from their nests and dens here, wildlife continued to subsist even today, no longer able to return to the days before man. This was just like any other forest situated next to a town. Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle. Winter had arrived in the woods, the chill cut like a razor, the icy air so thick it could reach one's bones. Exposed cheeks stiffened, and wisps of breath formed swirls in the air before disappearing. It was 1 degree above freezing. The cold snap penetrated every nook and cranny of the woods, from the ground to the trees to the wildlife. The cow jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed. The forest allowed nobody entry during the day. During the winter, it willed the animals to slumber. The still evening air felt like the stagnant breath of the lingering dead. The forest consumed the moonlight, obscuring the sight of even the closest of precipices, and hastening the untimely doom of any soul unfortunate enough to become lost within. The only noises to be heard were the whisperings of the wind and the murmurings of the stream. The immortal darkness stifled any sense of life. Not the breath of an animal, much less that of a person, was drawn in this place. However, a figure in black, not of this place, skulked within. It cast the tiniest, frailest of silhouettes, like a small boat lost in a sea of fog. Its trepidatious footsteps echoed through the woods. There, exiting the veil of trees, was the unmistakable likeness of a young girl.
To see such great under this run away with the spoon.
To see such craft and the dish run away with the spoon.
来たぞ来たぞ。いるぞいるぞ。
Someone's here, someone's here. There they are, there they are.
誰が誰が？誰と誰が？
Who can they be? Who can they be? Someone and someone.
お腹は減ったの？お腹は鳴ったさ。
Are you hungry? I'm starving.
どっちが食べる？どっちも食べる。
Which one should we eat? Let's eat them both.
君は左手。お前は右手。
You take the left. You take the right.
歓迎しないと。感激しないと。
We must welcome them. We must entertain them.
何しろようやく正しいお客。
After all, we don't often have guests.
ついでにお腹と頸骨も。せっかくだからよく噛まないと。
While we're at it, the stomach and the tibia. It's not often we get to chew the fat. The shadows in the trees laughed ominously. A hallucination? An illusion? Or perhaps something real? The shadows frolicked in time to the girl's pace.
さあさあさあさあ。
Come,
もっと奥へ。
come.
もっと奥へ。
Deeper and
と
deeper.
ころでダイスは細工済み？
Did you remember to rig the
お腹の
dice?
重いローデット。
Loaded innards they have.
端っこかじったエッジワーク。
Nibbled around the edges, baby.
どうでもいいけど肝心要の6の目だけは出さないように。
Just remember, don't roll that vital six. The girl knitted her eyebrows. She heard voices and felt the presence of things that should not be. Scary enough to frighten this particular girl? As if. Her tightly pursed lips betrayed not a hint of fear. The girl walked of her own volition. If she had truly felt fear, her legs would be frozen. Deep within the trees, she was perfectly aware of the two humanoid figures stalking her through the still night air.
見たぞ見たぞ。
I saw them, I saw
来
them.
るぞ来るぞ。
They're coming, they're coming.
もう諦めろ。
Give up.
もう帰れない。
There's no going back.
あんなに教えてあげたのに。
We warned you.
よそに消えないお前が悪い。
It's your fault for staying. The girl halted her steps. Racket from the accompanying voices died in turn. The babbling brook suddenly sounded like a crackling fire. And then, across the shallow stream, something appeared that should not exist in the city, much less these woods.
こんばんは。
Good
話のわかる人は
evening. I don't suppose I could speak to your master. The girl addressed them calmly. These men with their Glasgow grins creeped toward her like two slugs.
そう。ただの墓守り。監視だけが仕事なのね。
I see. Simple graveyard wards sent to be
失敗し
lookouts.
たわ。これなら青子に任せればよかった。
My mistake. I should have entrusted this to Aoko.
あ
However, the one grinning man stood still. The other, shaking violently, as if unable to contain himself any longer, turned toward the girl.
あ、青子にはまだ荷が重いわね。
Aoko still has a lot on her plate.
そんな姿だけど、あなたたちは一人前の魔術師のようだし。
Although you far from look the part, you seem to be on the level of a fully fledged mage. Her black outfit stirred. In her right hand, she held a vitreous cat, darker than the deepest night. The two Glasgow men let out a yelp of caution and incoherent fear. It was at this moment that they finally bared their intent and
さような
emotion.
ら、お客様。
Farewell, my guests.
きっと一瞬だろうから。お別れだけ言っておくわ。
Since this will take but a moment, I offer only a goodbye. The two shuddered at her words. They had no mouths, nor ears or brains to begin with. For creatures like these, words were redundant. All that existed was the present. For these soulless creatures, fears and hopes were nothing more than an unimaginable future. Then, what could be this feeling of foreboding they felt? The spine-chilling miracle that would rip them to pieces not moments from now.
さ
Come then,
あごっこ遊び
puppets.
をしましょ
Let us play make-believe. Her song sounded like a bell echoing through the white woods. The girl's voice vanquished the frost that had gripped the trees. Then,
う。いやいや、随分待たされた。
come on, don't keep us waiting.
さあ、赤ずきんの登場だ。
Come on, it's time for Little Red Riding Hood. The curtains opened on Diddle Diddle, the banquet of the night. In confusion, one slit-mouthed man swooped towards the girl. In fear, the other fled into the woods behind him. The deformed humanoid darted forth, kicking up water as it rushed the girl. She already knew what this fiend was. The grinning figure had scissors for hands and a demon's heart. It was a wretch who kidnapped children, mercilessly rendering them into pieces.
トゥイドル。
Tweedle,
お任せお任せ。
leave it to us.
ようやく出番だ。あらよ
It's finally our turn. The piglets bounded and rebounded like pedal balls. The stuffed animals, over 3 feet in length, jumped and weaved their way between the trees. Even with these strange creatures before him, the grinning man did not so much as blink. He raised his arms, but what emerged from his coat sleeves were not the human appendages you would expect. In their place, fiendish cleavers, more than 1.5 feet in length. These appendages, which had torn so much of the prey to pieces, sliced cleanly through the flying pig skulls. His limbs froze in place. The pigs' bodies were sliced perfectly in half. And then, bisected from head to tail, the pig's innards became as alligator jaws and clamped down upon the grinning man's arms. From fingertips to shoulders, they were swallowed whole. It was all it took to rob the man of control over his entire body. Another shiver of fear. These were no mere pig familiars. Immediately, he realized that these were stapler monsters disguised as mere pigs.
捕まえたのはダムでした。
I got him!
捕まえたのはギーだって。
No, I got him!
ああ、でも残念。ご主人様は無口で無情で無関心。
Oh, but too bad Master has no words, no emotion, no
結局、どっ
interest.
ちの手柄も同じこと。
In the end, it doesn't really matter who did it.
The bridge is broken down,
On
broken down, broken down.
the bridge is broken down, broken down. Impossible! Its presence murmured 3 times. Not possible, not possible, not possible. Talking pigs were one thing. Even having one's arms chopped off was in the realm of occupational hazard. In an instant, the wood was enveloped in a dense wave of magical energy, though vexing. It was still impressive. None of these facts were particularly extraordinary. These rare familiars, their bizarre attack, the sheer innate magical energy to overwhelm others. He had experience with all these things. His employer was skilled enough to achieve all of this as well. However,
どうするどうする。いつまで放置。
what now, what now? How long should we hold him like
手
this?
足一本、瞬きだって贅沢だ。
Even a blink of an eye is too long. Let's take an arm.
お支払いは面倒でも、できればポンドでお願いします。
I'll give you a good price if you'll pay me in pounds. What were they? Not vessels, not living creatures, not beings powered by magic circuits. Even though only his arms had been bitten, none of his body would move. It was nothing like being bound or weakened. This felt more like he had become words written in a book, fated to keep to their page. As the grinning figure's deformities indicated, He had overcome numerous curiosities and monstrosities, illusions, enthronement, compulsions, freezings, putrefacitions, and even petrifications, a power granted to only the pinnacle of mystic eyes. From poisons to magecraft, he had weathered a great deal, but this was something different altogether. The penalty that bound him now was based on different principles from blood, flesh, oxygen, or heat. It was an unknown restraint that followed no rules he knew. Indeed, though it was terrifying to admit, it was as if he had encountered something alien to everything in this world. London Bridge is broken down, broken down, broken down. London Bridge is broken down, my fair lady. Fangs sank into his left and right shoulders. For the first time in this form, he felt rage seethe up inside him. The basis of all things had to be absolute. All mystics, all things bizarre obeyed some set of laws. But these pigs ignored this, along with its dignity. After 3 days, you weaken. After 6, you drown. After half a year, you'll be a rich skeleton. Sorry to be rude, but we'll just kill you now. How? Though he had no voice, he let out an exasperated scream. Huh? Huh? What a convenient function to be able to detach your arms. What an unparalleled warrior. The talkative pigs fell into the stream. That exasperated scream was the sound of the figure tearing his arms from their sockets. Armless, he rushed the girl. Useless swine. I'll see you'll be punished later. He may have lost his mangled arms, but not the object of his malice. A mystic eye to pierce the heart of its victim. A magic circuit designed to stop a beating heart. It was beautiful in its simplicity. At point-blank range, it was the equivalent of an unavoidable shotgun blast. But, tragically, that eye was all he had. Build it up with wood and clay, wood and clay, wood and clay. Build it up with wood and clay, my fair lady. He failed to realize that her song had changed. For the giant, the earth-shattering strike was akin to the act of shooing away an insect. Its green, verdant veins pulsed. Oaken bark covered its body, hardened sufficiently over centuries to repel even a chainsaw. On its forehead, inscribed in all manners of colors, was the word Emeth. Though judging from its misspelling, the inscription was purely decorative. The Thames Troll. It also went by the moniker Falling Down, or alternatively, the Great Bridge. Admired in different forms, it was the first of 4 miracles. Thames, please take care of the other one. The giant responded to the girl's words. With roots rent deep into the earth, it raised its left arm to the heavens without moving a step. Elsewhere in the forest, the grinning figure who had chosen to flee the battle was running through the night forest at full speed, record and provide a detailed description of the enemy. Those were the orders assigned to him. He poured all of his energy into escaping this forest with which he had become so familiar. In case of emergency, the plan was for one to challenge the enemy, while the other made a tactical retreat in order to report to their master. He dashed through the forest. Though gripped by fear, he was confident in his ability to perform the mission he was designed for. Nothing could catch him in these woods. Even the wolves could not track him. His bird-like legs thumped as they kicked the ground. Perhaps it was his creator's eccentric tastes that dictated their form when optimizing them for running. The grinning man could reach a maximum speed of 45 miles per hour, well past the limit of any bipedal creature. After securing a distance of several miles, he turned around to confirm his safety. There was no sign of pursuit. His crescent-shaped mouth, nay, eyes slackened in relief. And then, after facing forward once more, he looked up to lock eyes with his doom.
London Bridge is broken down, broken down, broken down.
London Bridge is broken down, broken down, broken down. In the distance, he could hear the dark rhymes of Mother Goose. Countless vines extended from the ground. They formed into a monstrosity that conjured up images of an arched bridge, something resembling a giant arm.
London Bridge is broken down, my fair lady.
London Bridge is broken down, my fair lady. Final report. Survival unable to complete. Analysis unable to complete. Transmission unable to complete. Ending session. Ah, oh master, preserve me from. I think we're
お
about
疲れ
done here.
様。戻ってテムズ。
Well done, Thames. You can return now.
次はもっと高価な場所ならいいのだけど。
Hopefully our next encounter will be more worth our time. The girl turned on her heel. The invaders who had set up shop in the woods were eliminated. She had no interest in whether they had been good or evil, nor how many victims they had claimed. The shackles of civic society held no sway over her. This was the way of a pure-blooded witch, the way of a mindster. Hey, what about us? What about us? Help me get this arm out of my teeth. We really shouldn't move while we're eating. Don't tell us you don't need pigs that can't fly. We'll do a better job next time, though we're nothing but screw-ups. Yeah, you owe us at least one compliment before the end. The girl let out a sigh and stepped into the stream. She removed her gloves and dipped her slender fingers into the ice water. I told you not to roll sixes. But I suppose it is the only number you can roll. There was no response to her melancholy tone. In place of the once boisterous pigs were two black dice, now sitting in the palm of her hand. As the girl was about to say something to the scattered remains around her, she realized something that made her put her hand to her mouth. The farewell is over. Should I have asked them if they had any last words? Her slender, pale fingers raised her lips, as if reluctant to part from them. Sighing again, she calmly left the dark woods the same way she had entered. This fragmented telling of bygone days ends here. Now we must fix our lenses and return to the very beginning. Make yourself comfortable. We kept you waiting long enough. Without further ado, which on the holy night? Arrogant, greedy, and able only to destroy, I must be a wolf. I don't have regrets. There's no looking back. If my pride has left you behind, my sincere condolences. But at any rate, I suppose it's my fate to die at the hands of Little Red Riding Hood. It was a quiet morning. From her bed, she could see the sky was an ashen watercolor gray. The thermometer displayed 43 degrees Fahrenheit, a rather unforgiving temperature for November. Her stomach woke her up with a growl, pathetically reminding her that she had completely missed breakfast. But lazy mornings like today's were, for her, a blessing. It was already well past 8 in the morning, or any ordinary weekday tardiness would be unavoidable. But today, classes were cancelled in commemoration of the school's anniversary. Gratefully, she had every intention of taking it easy for the first time in ages. Outside the window was a gloomy gray, and it reminded her more of evening than morning. It wasn't a pleasant morning by any stretch of the imagination, but having been up all night until just 3 hours ago, she couldn't care less about the weather outside. All she cared about was more sleep. As long as she could spend her morning in bed, what was happening outside was of no concern to her. She shut the curtains, then closed her eyes and tried to let sleep claim her. I'd like a nice uneventful dreams for 2 hours, thank you. Blissful slumber found her soon enough. Her consciousness faded. However, her simple request would be mercilessly refused. A faint but shrill sound lingered in her ears. It was the unmistakable ring of a telephone. Much to her chagrin, out of habit, her eyes popped open. Oh, come on. Why today of all days? The telephone was situated in the foyer on the first floor. Answering it meant walking down a 30-foot corridor and going down a flight of stairs. In her sleep-deprived state, that distance seemed somewhere between incredibly far and astronomically far. The phone's incessant ringing continued. She knew the caller would eventually give up if she ignored it, but she chose to fight the urge. Why doesn't Alice answer it? She thought her housemate would get it, but she soon had to abandon all hope. The realization struck that her housemate did not have the day off from school and was likely in class at her prestigious little Hilltop Academy. The caller proved incredibly persistent. That persistence made the volume of the ringing seem even louder. Ugh, I'm trying to sleep here. She was left with no choice but to get up, throw a top on, and leave the room. God, it's cold. She rubbed her hands together to warm her numb fingers. The mansion's heating system was inadequate, to say the least, which meant that winter was the very worst of uninvited guests. Never more so than on a dreary morning as this, when one didn't need to use a thermometer to know how cold it was. The mansion sat in the mountains and was surrounded by dense forest. Winter always arrived here first, before moving on to nearby towns. The robotic ring of the telephone reverberated throughout the long hallway. The mansion's furnishings had been so perfectly maintained that it made the place feel unlived. It seemed lonelier than it did splendid. Coupled with the dreary morning, it could have passed for a haunted house. Well, it is a haunted house, I suppose. It's too large just for the two of us. She counted more than 30 rings since it first began. The caller either had a lot of free time on their hands or had a good understanding of the house's circumstances. She had a strong hunch that it was the latter. The window above looked out onto a gloomy sky. She hastened to catch the unrelenting ring in the act as soon as possible, though she had a feeling that her happy morning might come to a close the moment she caught it. It was here that a series of incidents began. Apologies for the lack of romance at the cell, for whether it be objectively true or merely supposition, it is always from gloomy and unassuming beginnings that extraordinary events are set into motion. Everything until now has been but a portrait of peace. From this point begins the story of a slightly naive, unassuming young witch. Was that it? Was that the demo? Dude, I feel like nothing happened. It's just a visual. I feel like what? Literally nothing happened. It was no reading. There was no gameplay. Why didn't they just sell it as like a book? Like legit, a bunch of nothing happened. Like I just read for an hour and a half for nothing. Legitimately. Music was good though. Ryuki Fukasawa and Nikita Hara. The writing, there was a lot of grammar errors. In the writing. Wait, I don't know. I thought it was gonna be like a horror. Well, I thought it was leaning towards horror, but it didn't get into it. Not really. I will eventually be playing the Emio. Or Famicom Detective for the Emio demo, so maybe that would be better than this, because I mean I just read the legit was just a bunch of fucking whatever. Like I guess the night stuff was cool where Alice was fighting, but there was a bunch of fucking fluff. Witch on the holy night. Thanks. I don't know. I don't think anyone watched this whole through, but I mean I wouldn't. So it's just a lot of reading. Alright, well that's it. Shit, yeah, there we go.